I'd like to call this June 3rd regular Board of Education meeting work session to order at 7 p.m. George, could you take the roll?
Yep. Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Mrs. Ali?
Here.
Mr. Micko?
He's running 10 to 15 minutes late tonight.
Mr. Roberts? Here. Mrs. Hausum?
Here. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point of the meeting, we always state our district goals, and those include financial prudency, academic achievement, and community engagement. Do we have any public comment?
No, we haven't received any.
Okay. All right, Cameron, I'll turn it over to you for recognition.
Thank you, Ms. Hausum. We do have one recognition here tonight, so I'd like to have our track coach, Danielle Blackman, come to the podium to introduce the recognition tonight. Danielle?
Thank you. So I would just like to recognize Jackson Griffin. And Jackson, I don't know if you want to come up and stand next to me so the crowd can see you as I give my little speech. All right, so as I'm just here to represent the Strongsville coaches, but we want to congratulate Jackson, an 8th grade Strongsville Middle School student athlete. Jackson Griffin recently competed at the middle school state track meet. This is an elite competition that only features the top 24 athletes in the state of Ohio at the middle school level. And in order to qualify, you have to, the meet has to be ran as an FAT meet, it's called. So it has to be a fully automated, automatic timing system, so it just can't be iPads or stopwatches or anything like that. So the state of Ohio has really amped up the qualifications for it. And Jackson placed 8th in the long jump with a personal record of 19.2 1/4, and also set a personal record in the 400-meter dash with a time of 55 seconds and 55 hundredths of a second. So we just have a couple words to say about Jackson as coaches. Jackson's one of the most humble athletes that we've ever coached. He works hard at practice every day. People look up to him. They are always like, I want to be like Jackson. And when you look at Jackson, he never complains at a practice. He gets out there, he does what he needs to do. He's a leader on the track. Before an event, he's right there ready to warm up, and he's ready to go. He gets his mind set into his events. Another just little story, we had a grade 8 meet at the middle school, and this is the east and the west of our conference, and we get the top 4 in each event. And one of the other athletes came over to congratulate Jackson and was like, you're such a, I think he said, a try-hard in the 400. You use starting blocks. And Jackson just like rolled it off his shoulders and tried to be a businessman and tried to recruit him for the summer track program. So he just thanked him and then just, kept on going and, congratulated him as well. So I think that's pretty cool, because that's who you represent. So Jackson, we just want to thank you for representing our school and district and community, not just as an athlete, but truly as a student athlete. I was fortunate to have Jackson in class also. And during this crazy school year, he was quarantined for a little bit too, always online, ready to go, asking questions, needing help with his calculator. He'd turn his screen on and I'd help him through everything. So that just shows a lot, that it's not just being an athlete, but it's also in the classroom too. The students look up to him in the classroom. So he's just a great role model for Strongsville. So not only do you inspire your peers, but you also inspire the future athletes as he's taking part of the summer track program, and the little kids look up to him. But you also inspire us as coaches too, because we look at how hard you work and we just want to make you that much better also. So your presence in the classroom motivates others. You are a role model to the Strongsville community, and I'm excited to see your accomplishments at the high school, and I know the coaches and athletes and parents can't wait to have you up there. So congratulations.
And Jackson, we have, on behalf of the district, we have a certificate for you as well.
I don't know, are you allowed to shake hands now? So I'm good with it, Jackson, but I don't know what all the rules are. But Jackson, as I said, and all joking aside, I've seen you as a young man at Kinsner Elementary School, your sister, I know your family, wonderful family, and just thrilled, not solely about your accomplishments in track or in athletics, but just as that's the theme we've heard for you during your entire time in this district, is just an all-around wonderful young man that makes us better. So congratulations on your accomplishments in the classroom and in the long jump and in the 400 and all the other events. And you kind of had to be a good runner, right? In the family, it runs in the family. And so best of luck to you. Looking forward to seeing all that you're going to accomplish in future years. Thank you. Yeah. Jackson, Mr. Griffin, you're more than welcome to stay for the meeting, or you can excuse yourself at this time. And Ms. Blackman, thank you. Have a wonderful summer. Yep.
All right, at this point, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Ryba for the public hearing section of our meeting.
Thank you. So as I've shared in my parent update, the last couple that I did prior to school being out, that we have to have a public hearing. The official name is a Safe Return to In-Person Instruction and a Continuity of Services Plan. And this all goes together with the ESSER funds that we've been sharing and talking about as a school district. So ESSER are federal funds that are given to the state. That allocation to the state level is given to school districts. And based on those rules, the federal government creates a series of criteria of how we can utilize the funds, and the state, develops their criteria as well. And a piece of that is that it's not just, hey, we're going to give you a little over $6.1 million, school district, here's some general guidelines you can use them for. There are specific criteria that need to be met, specific items in which these dollars can be used for, and then other requirements that we have to fulfill. So one of those is that by June 24th, we have to submit our plan to the state. We have to post it on our website. If you remember, last summer we had a remote learning plan, very similar structure and requirements. But what we want to do or tonight is there is a public hearing component. So beyond what I've shared via email, we need to have a public hearing. And this is an opportunity for any community members that may be here tonight, or Ms. Kosick as the one community member here tonight, and the board to share any feedback. So you have the slides in front of you if you'd like to follow along, or I will have the slides on the board. So before we get into ESSER, we want to talk about this continuity of services plan. And again, this will be shared with all of our families. We'll share the presentation with them in an upcoming email. And so what the government says is, here are specific things that you need to address for the 21-22 school year of how you're going to operate, how you're going to make sure that services are provided, no matter what structure you're in, or most importantly, keep in-person learning going. This may seem a little odd because we've been in person a lot, but this is a statewide issue. So even school districts that you would consider comparable school districts in Columbus, they didn't go to school, go back in person till April-ish. So, but this is something that we want to present to the community and the board. And again, this is a rough draft. This is not meant to be a final, presentation to you, but a rough draft where we can get some feedback, and we have until June 24th to finalize. But this is our last board meeting prior to that point. So the first category is, what policies do we have for mitigation strategy? So this kind of gets into the health and safety of our plan. And so as we talked about last board meeting, universal and correct wearing of facial coverings based on the board policy does not change. The board policy was maize and cans. But we did update the AG once that's finalized and put into place. We'll link it here for everybody. But basically it says that masks are at the discretion of the individual. And so that's, the policy's been updated, reflects the state health orders that have been removed, and that they can be worn at the discretion of the individual. If people select to wear those, just a reminder of the proper wearing of facial coverings. I'm going to keep going unless there's a pause by anybody, or let me know if you have any questions on each one of these slides, and we can go back at the end. Physical distancing in the classroom. So, we're still finalizing all of the criteria. Our building administrators have shared what they would like to do for next year. They're still fine tuning that. But predominantly is, we are going to strive for a 3-foot social distance from person to person. So from me to Michelle will be 3 foot. However, that's what we're going to strive for. We're not saying we're guaranteeing that. Based on class sizes, based on space of room, it may be a little more, it may be a little less, but that's what we're striving towards. So there will be no district. Last year it was we were striving for 5 feet. Next year we'll strive for 3 feet. Outside of the classroom, whether it's on district property or outside at recess, we're asking for a similar distance. And then on school buses, we're recommending that we keep the capacity limit that we had for this year, which is 2 students per seat, which averages about 44 students per bus. So that's what we're looking for: physical distancing in the classrooms, outside of the classrooms, and on our school buses.
Cameron, for the 3 feet piece, for like the labs and so forth, I know this year we took the tables out. Are we implementing the tables back in to have that collaboration in those particular classes, or are we trying to get away from that stuff?
That's a great question, Mr. Roberts. So we are putting all of the typical furniture back into the classroom. So the custodians and science tables are going to go back in. At the elementary school, what they are, again, they're still finishing their plans. They've submitted as 5 individual elementaries, and they're looking. So the elementaries have desks, but they're looking to put kidney tables in so they can do small group work. But we would just say we're going to have 2 to 3 kids at the table instead of 5 to 6. So there will still be some distancing, but we will go back and put our furniture back in our classrooms.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing that we are still looking to implement is personal furniture. The bean bags, those sitting areas will still be out until further notice. Hand washing, again, these are categories that they say this needs to be in your plan. But hand washing and respiratory etiquette, we will still continue to remind and post signage around the buildings. Obviously we have signage in the bathrooms above the bathroom sinks. We'll have signage still around the buildings about remembering to, use a Kleenex, sneeze in your elbow, cough in your elbow, things of that nature, and proper hand techniques for hand washing. Those will still be posted in the district and around the building and recommended. We were able, thanks to some community partnerships between some of our members here, we were able to get a sizable donation of hand sanitizer, so we greatly appreciate that. And one of the things Steve has communicated with, doesn't directly go with this, but with the hand sanitization, we have told all of our building principals to not put a hand sanitizer on the school supply list. That way we can control it, make sure it's the stuff that actually works the best and is the most appropriate. So the school district will continue to provide hand sanitizer just like we have this school year. Cleaning and maintaining the healthy facilities, really we see no change in the process and procedures that we've utilized this year. So the first part of it is, what is our cleaning and disinfection plan? It's going to be very similar to what we've done this past year. Obviously with some of the sporting events, and we're going to electrostatic spray between, those will probably lessen and may not be in place. But I'm talking about in terms of how do we clean high-touch and disinfect high-touch surfaces? How do we clean the classrooms at night? Steve is looking to implement those same procedures in our bathrooms in our buildings, so that would stay the same. They also asked that we put something in there about what we're doing with air filtration and airflow. We've talked a lot about that, and the board has given the direction that, hey, we feel that our air quality is at a good level. And so that document Steve put together last summer, I think, is still relevant to say how we're going to, increase the damper as much as we can during certain months to get as much fresh air in and move the airflow, and how our units in the buildings are just circulating air within a classroom rather than throughout a section of the building like our homes do. So no changes from this past year in really any of these areas, except for maybe a reduction in some of the electrostatic spraying that we've done at big events. Contact tracing, isolation, and quarantine. So as long as we have cases of COVID, we are going to still contact trace. I kind of left it a little vague in here because, the state guidance and the Board of Health guidance evolves all the time to what quarantine and isolations need to happen. So basically what I said is if I contract COVID, Jenny and the team is still going to do their contact tracing, but whatever the guidance is from the state or the local Board of Health in terms of quarantines, we will implement. It becomes difficult to put it on here because it's, if you're vaccinated, here's the steps you have to do. If you're unvaccinated, here's the steps that you have to do. So we'll follow the health guidance. They wanted us to talk about, what we're doing for diagnostic and screening tests. So we've talked about it in the past, but as school districts now, they do have COVID tests that are available that school districts could provide. We haven't really had an outcrying of need for that here from our community, or we haven't really looked internally that that's been a need. So what this is saying is that we're not participating in any of the available diagnostic or screening programs for COVID-19. We're still asking families to do that self-assessment. If I have a cough, if I have a fever, if I've lost taste and smell or other of the symptoms, please, we still want parents to do the good work that they did this year and keep kids home if they're not feeling good. Even when we get past COVID, those are good suggestions to do. So we're asking for all of that to still be the case. The same with our staff as well, to take the daily health assessment and make sure we're coming to school, we're coming to work when we're feeling well. And then the next part is they wanted us to look at what are the efforts we've made to provide vaccinations. We've done, I think, everything we possibly can. With the collaboration in Cuyahoga County, we had a vaccination clinic for all of our staff. You could see I put on there we had a pretty good vaccination rate for our staff. And when you see these rates, as Richard said last time, it doesn't mean we've only had 331 vaccinated. It's just 331 that we know of. We didn't collect that data outside of us this past year. And so those are some of the things that, it could be higher or people have changed their mind at that point. We did have the opportunity to house clinics here in the district. We surveyed when it was only 16 on up. We surveyed our families, and we had, I think, started out 75 and then maybe got to the low 100 and some. So we just don't have the numbers to support a clinic. We've had offers to have a clinic for our 12 on up, but we just simply don't have the numbers because we have Giant Eagle and Walgreens and Rite Aid and Drug Mart and all these places that have it available. So we've promoted that, as you've seen in my weekly updates. We keep a running list of here's all the local clinics that have the vaccine for our families. Before I go on, not in the plan, but just as an FYI to the board and the community, is we are looking at plans to collect information on students that are vaccinated. We need that for athletics. I talked to Andy, our Director of Student Services today, and Jenny about looking at, we're not sure where the state's going or whether it's going to be, what they're doing with this vaccine and what we have to collect. But at minimum, athletics, we need to have it because of the different rules for athletics and vaccinations. But on our annual enrollment system, at minimum, a voluntary, is your child have the COVID vaccine, yes or no? So that will help us in contact tracing and all of those things we need to do. And then finally, in this section, the health and safety and accommodations for children with disabilities. We will continue, obviously, with students with disabilities, how we meet our students' needs is based on an IEP team decision. So that includes the parents, school staff, administration, and related service personnel. We will also continue on with the remote learning plans for families with students with disabilities, so that if they need to, whether it's their own health condition or whether it's a quarantine that services, we know those services and how they'll be provided in a virtual setting or at home setting prior to having to be implemented. So just to make sure there's clarity on this, we are still not providing a live streamed experience. That's not an option that's on the table, right? That's not something we're doing for all students, and that's not legally available as of right now to do that. What this means is, for our students with disabilities, how are we providing at-home instruction? How are we providing home support, and things of that nature? So that's what the remote learning plan would discuss and the IEP team would discuss. Any questions on that section, which is the lengthiest section of the four? All right, continuity of services is just how are we going to keep services going for our students? So academically, Our plan is to be in-person learning. We've been in-person learning for a long time. Our students, I don't need to go into detail what academic services look like in-person learning. We're going to continue to provide them throughout next school year. We are also providing an asynchronous virtual option in grades K to 12. So the only aspect where we don't provide that option is preschool. But K to 12, we provide that program. And for students in that program, we can provide some additional support for students with disabilities, students identified as gifted, English learner, Title I, or students identified as not on track in reading can receive some additional supports in our asynchronous program. For social, emotional, and mental health services, through the ESSER funds, we've been able to, we're hiring our last elementary guidance counselor. So we will have an elementary guidance counselor at every elementary school. We'll continue with the same level of support, 3 at the middle school, 5 at the high school. During this time also, we will have 2 full-time social workers. We have a partnership with a local counseling service to provide clinical counseling in the school district, as well as we have clear social emotional learning standards. We have social emotional learning programs that are integrated into lessons and into the curriculum. So in terms of supporting our students academically and social emotionally, those are the areas where we're focusing our attention. And then I think finally for this section is food services. So basically what this is saying is no matter when or where you're receiving your educational services, you'll have an opportunity for food services. And it will continue to be a free program for all students for the upcoming school year. So we are going to offer over in our summer learning program, if you attend our summer learning program, you can get breakfast when you arrive and a small snack when you leave. A bag lunch when you leave. During the summer months, an email went out again today of here's the pickup time and location and sign up. So if you want to receive the free breakfast and lunch boxes over the summer, you can receive that. In-person learners can receive free breakfast and lunch all next year in the school that are attending school. And just like we did last year, if you're attending our virtual learning program, there'll be specific buildings and days where you can come pick up the box lunch. So all kids will have the opportunity to be fed. Any questions on the services? All right, periodic review is just that, how it is simply as that. How often is the school district going to review our plan? So internally, we're going to review the plan in August, November, and February. The reason we're not going to review it after that is the school year is over. And so, those are the times we'll review. We'll make revisions based on our internal review, based on practice that we've seen, safety guidelines that are put out, local health guidelines, et cetera, and we'll communicate those to parents. In terms of public input, we have a weekly email communication that's sent to parents. They always have the opportunity to share their feedback through that. We always do a variety of surveys throughout the school year. We've held focus groups throughout the school year, and we'll continue to do that. So we have the public hearing today in June. We'll have another hearing in January just to see if there's any feedback. We'll stick with the kind of pattern we used of a survey in January to see, and then those themes will be culminated. We'll share them with stakeholders. We'll share them with the board, and if revisions need to be made, we can make revisions at that time.
So, to be clear, the internal review schedule, that's the minimum. If events on the ground dictate it, we can review it more often and we can adjust it more often. What we're committing to is this minimum review, along with committing to communicating it to parents and stakeholders.
Correct. Any questions on this aspect of the plan? So the next part goes to how are we going to spend the ESSER dollars that we're given? So I'm not going to go through a lot of these slides because we've talked about them in previous times, and they've been shared to our families about what ESSER funds are and how we can use them, that we're receiving $6.1 million, and they can be used for a variety of things. And we've talked about with the board, and we've talked about, or we've shared in our communications about how we're going to use those for summer programming, which starts on Monday. Which I just want to, say thank you to Jenny and Aaron and Dave and Andy and Sean and Amy and anyone else I'm sure I forgot to say thank you to and mention But it has been a team effort. We've got transportation services, we've got food services involved, we've got tech setup, makerspace, a ton of teachers involved. I think we had a little trivia game yesterday, and I think at the elementary level, we have over 500 elementary students, correct?
I think it's closer to 900
Elementary?
Yeah.
Was it over? Okay.
overall.
It's a lot of kids.
It's a lot.
So we're,
Let's say that again, because that's outstanding.
Well, I know, don't quote me exact numbers, but with Makerspace, with Gifted, with Gifted, and then our ELA and math just at elementary book club also, and also students coming for school counseling services. It's upwards. I know it's close to that.
That's great to hear. I mean,
Yeah.
it's good to hear that our community values what we're proposing and is not just valuing it, but taking advantage of it.
yeah, so we're all set and ready to go for next week for the elementary and the secondary. Looking at the instructional support slide, the only thing that I've added on, so all of this has been shared before. The only addition is the special education coach. That's an opportunity that we were taking a look at to see whether we had the available funds to utilize some of those to have a special education coach, to provide support in learning gaps, providing support to our intervention specialists to help support those learning gaps, and developing high-quality, specially designed instruction and making sure that instruction's done in the least restrictive environment for our students. So as George has spent a lot of time over the last weeks going through the details and looking at the funding, and we're getting some people, actual persons identified. We know the exact dollar figures that they're going to cost. We were able to allocate some funds that we weren't sure whether we're going to be able to allocate. But the rest of these positions we've talked about publicly in the past. Counselor and social worker we've talked about as well as the administrative support. So not trying to go quickly, but we've talked about that in the past. So what I want to spend time on today is talking about the piece we haven't, which is the non-staffing items, the technology, the software, the programs, the equipment, the capital improvements. And so let's start with instructional technology, and we're kind of breaking this down into three areas. And I'll have Dave on the ready if you want any details of specifically what some of these things do. He's our guy that could help fill us in on all of those details. So we have some subscriptions and new technology that we utilized with the pandemic, some prior. But a lot of with the pandemic, or we went to the professional license piece of it, that really are good instructional tools no matter what. And so we have a variety of items here that are going to support student learning and technology experience that will be renewal of subscriptions. So ClassLink, this is something we got a lot of positive feedback from our parent focus groups. That's the one that makes every Chromebook look like an iPad. Where you just see all the icons of school-related links that I need to go to. It's single sign-on a lot too, right, Dave? So I don't have to remember all these passwords. I click on the icon, it recognizes my ID, it goes right there. Edpuzzle, Kami, Pear Deck, those are ones that are just teaching tools that help engage students in in-person learning through virtual tools. Rosetta Stone, we know that we're utilizing that for our English learners. Screencastify is how teachers can capture their video, either capturing their screen or themselves and talking. And Typing Agent is a typing program that's elementary, right, Dave? So an elementary typing program that's going to help solidify typing skills for our students. We've got some new subscriptions that we're looking at. And Dave, this is where I'd like you to come up because I think some of these things are good tools that maybe some of our parents or board members or community are not sure about, all these unique names that they come up with, but give a quick overview of what these three items do.
So BLOXY is a class management program. So through a Google extension that we install, a teacher can open up a dashboard and they're able to see what the students are doing on their Chromebook at that time. They can see all the individual tabs. We piloted this in the last about month and a half with our tech coaches and a couple select teachers in the buildings, so they could see not only the students that were in the classroom, but also the remote students to see if they were on task, do they have any extra tabs open. They were also able to lock down tabs for like Google Form quizzes or other quizzes that were online. They were able to send messages to students like, I was piling it with my own son, and I would see that he's online and he wasn't supposed to be at that time. I sent him a message, why aren't you in math class right now? And he saw that, and then all of a sudden he closed his Chromebook because it disappeared. So it allows you to see what they're doing, manage it. You can even share out websites. So like if a teacher says, everybody let's go to, any kind of website, this image, they could send it out to the students that way in one click and everybody's screen goes there. So it's a nice tool. There's a lot of similar programs, but it's the one that's most financially best for us, I feel, at this time, and it does meet all the basic needs of what the teachers have asked for.
GIMPKIT?
GIMPKIT is a interactive gaming program, kind of like Kahoot. It's all kind of different things here and there. But one of the nice things is if you've ever played Kahoot before, it's kind of like Jeopardy where you get a couple seconds to read it and then you got to answer it. So if a student or even an adult, as like myself, has a slower reading time, you're penalized because your point value goes down because it takes a longer time to read. GIMPKIT gives an equal time for everybody to read, and then you can participate in its equal point value. So it's a better, equitable experience for our students, I feel. And then WeVideo, this will be 6 through 12. What's great about Screencastify is it allows anybody to make a video, but editing the video is difficult because you can just trim them, or to cut them up is really difficult. WeVideo is a Chromebook-based or web application that can work on Chromebooks that allows full video editing for our students and staff. What's also nice is WeVideo is the only green screen program, or easy green screen program for Chromebooks that we can edit with. So we can maybe utilize some of our green screen areas a little bit more, just because the learning curve would be reduced with WeVideo compared to some of the other technology in the buildings. Can't do everything that's already there, but it just gives another opportunity and a new experience that they can have in the classroom.
Thanks, Dave. And then we're also going to utilize some of the funds for our asynchronous learning system. So the Edmentum at the secondary level, Lincoln Learning at the elementary level, those are on a per student basis, and so we'll utilize those funds to help support that. In terms of software and tech solutions, MTSS, that's an acronym which means multi-tiered systems of support. It's a big topic, but what we purchased is a web-based platform, and it's going to help us when we look at students and the support we're providing, and we can see, we have data to say this student is at this point in their reading development, and here's how that compares against Strongsville peers, and here's how it compares nationally. And they may be a little bit behind, so we have to provide interventions. We want to track those interventions. We want to progress monitor, which means we're going to measure at certain points of time to see the progress that's going. Right now, we have this information like in 3 or 4 different systems. And then they don't transfer from first grade to middle school to high school. So the board already approved this at the last board meeting. This was part of the Power School purchase that was made. But this is going to help us put all the information in one spot and then be able to have that vertical alignment so teachers don't have to recreate the wheel in 7th grade to see what all the 6th grade teachers have done, or all the different elementary schools. FiveLab, we have a variety of tools that we use through the Five suite of products. George uses a lot in the treasurer's office. But it's a software solution that grabs information from a variety of data sources and puts them into one dashboard view and allows us to create graphs and analytics based on what we want to look at. So one that I use a lot is, if I want to take a look at and say, okay, for position X, we have a salary range for this position. Is this equitable? I can take a look at that position. I could look and compare us against all Cuyahoga County school districts. I can compare it against all school districts around the state. I can just look at Cuyahoga County and select the ones that are similar to us. And so it helps us to see in a variety of ways. I could do that for state test scores. I could do it for a variety of things. FiveLab is a component of this package that lets us look at that at a granular level for the student. So I can take a look at how are all of our kids doing in a variety of metrics in earth science at the high school. I could drill that down then to teacher. I could drill that down then to class. I could drill that down to student. And then I can look at, because it's going to grab from our student discipline system, It's going to grab from our student attendance system. It's going to grab from our grades. It's going to grab from our state assessments. I can have a window and look into, see the trajectory or pattern of a student, not by having to go to 8 different locations, but it's all in one spot. So it's been very helpful, and we're looking forward to utilizing this product. Google Suite is what we all know we utilize. We have to pay. There's an enterprise program that comes with it. It gives us nice features that we're able to run everything we do with Google. So that's an allowable expense we would use. I can never say it. Lil Sis is gives us administrative access to Google Classroom. So in the past, I'd have to say, hey, Ms. Hausum, what's your password? So I can get, or invite me to your classroom as a student. This gives me the ability as an administrator, based on whatever permissions are set, I can see everybody's Google Classroom in one click. And then finally, mobile hotspots. We started with mobile hotspots last year. We have a 2-year service agreement on those mobile hotspots. So continuing to utilize those as needed, and then utilize the funds to pay for those.
For the mobile hotspots, do we know how often they were used, or just the usage rate of that, and kind of what the return is?
They've not been utilized very efficiently or effectively. So that's something that I could say that Jenny and I have used them as we travel to places that don't have great Wi-Fi access. But in terms of, what do we have at most, Dave? Like 3 or 4 that were out?
Yeah, so it was less than 5 throughout the year, because sometimes it was during peak times they would ask for like testing, and then when they were done with testing, they would return it, because they just wanted to ensure that they had enough Wi-Fi bandwidth so they wouldn't be interrupted.
Yeah, so less, because I know the mic's not going to pick Dave up all the way back there, but less than 5 for very specific reasons. So we haven't had a large outcry for support, but those are something that, as we take a look to next year, we can be more deliberate in reaching out to families to see, because if we're going to pay for it, we want them to be used. So the ones that we're paying for are the mobile hotspots, and we have, 20 of those? And then we have, through the grant dollars, we have a handful of mobile hotspots that are built for the bus. So Dave has been working with Steve and problem solving some of the challenges of being able to utilize those. So as we have more of sporting events and more trips or more field trips, those will be nice things that we can, we'll be working to put on the bus, so there could be Wi-Fi access as we travel.
Cameron, one of the things that I'd like us to all to think about and be aware of is, with the subscription software, you pay for the subscription. If you use it once, you pay the same amount if you use it 100 times. So I'd like to make sure ahead of time we're going to be in a position to see our utilization, so that when these things return next year, we'll have a rationale for this product's being used, let's renew it. This product isn't being used, let's be a little surgical about it.
Yeah, and that's how we made the decisions this year. So Dave looks through the analytics, and he can see, here's how much Edpuzzle is going to be used, or here's the level. So he provides the recommendations to us on, here's one that's not being used, and so maybe we don't continue with it, or here's one that's not being, we've had a district-wide, but we really only need it at this level, so we'll continue to do that, absolutely. Going on to supplies, we've developed a plan where, now that we're going to let, starting in 3rd grade, Chromebooks travel to and from school, that we're looking at 2 points where the district will provide Chromebook cases. We'll provide Chromebook cases in 3rd grade, and then students can use those through 8th, and then we'll provide Chromebook cases in 9th grade. So that it will help to purchase those. Webcams for the classroom. Dave bought all webcams for all the classrooms last year. This is going to help us replace some of the ones that go bad and have some extras on hand. So even though we think webcam, okay, isn't that being used for live streaming? No, we use webcams all the time for the recording of lessons and the screencastifies and the videos that are being done. So the webcams are a good tool for us. Document cameras, looking at buying more of those. So document cameras, if you think of the old overhead projector, it's just a digital version of that. I've got a little camera. It could look at my sheet right here, and it could project it on the board. So that's the tool that our teachers like, and it's a good tool to have. We've also used it for summer learning program expenses, the Apex program, which is for 6 to 12, and supplies for the summer program and Makerspace as well. In terms of curriculum or professional development, we're looking to utilize this in 2 ways. First of all, second step, again, you made these look familiar because they've been on board agendas because we needed to purchase them, and we said, hey, when ESSER funds are available. But second step is social emotional learning lessons. Our school counselors use those in grades K to 8. So this would give us a 5-year subscription to those resources. Aaron has done a tremendous amount of work. It was paused a little bit with the pandemic, but in terms of the science of reading, looking at how we actually teach reading and should be teaching reading and developing capacity within our administrators and our teachers to be able to do that. Letters training is the epitome of the model you want to follow and train. Steve Owens, one of our literacy coaches, he is trained as a letters trainer. So that's a huge cost savings for us that we can utilize his services. And so we're paying for access to the program and then paying for to facilitate that and train all of our pre-K to 5 teachers in the letters training throughout the next 2 years. So this is, again, will help to address learning loss, learning gaps, and better literacy practices as we move forward. In terms of the last one is capital improvements and equipment. So there is an aspect of the ESSER funds that you can utilize for capital improvements. And so there's 3 that were on the list. One the board has already approved. That was a custodial equipment. We wanted to get that in time for the summer cleaning season. So this was replacing outdated equipment. And so that's already been purchased. But 2 that we have on the list, one of them is window replacements. So at the buildings, Chapman, Sarrar, Whitney, and here, as in the past, as windows needed replaced, they were replaced with plexiglass. Plexiglass is not the most efficient in retaining heat during the winter or cool during the summer. And over years, they gray aesthetically, they're not pleasing, or you really can't get natural light in through the window. So this is a part of, is a part of Steve's. Steve has a 5-year capital improvement PI plan. But this qualifies for ESSER funds, so we're recommending that the window replacement in these buildings happen using the ESSER funds. And then the Kinsner HVAC system, when we had all of our construction and GPD was here, we had them also assess our variety of infrastructure. And one of the recommendations was that Kinsner's, we've always had historically issues with HVAC at Kinsner in terms of dampness, humidity, just general airflow in the building. And so that HVAC, just like we did with Chapman a handful of years ago, Kinsner is the next on the list of that it needs, to move to rooftop units in a chiller plant. We could use existing ductwork, but that's another allowable ESSER fund. And we have the funding available based on our plans, so we're recommending that to be utilized. So that comes to the end, and now it's time for feedback.
I just have a question about the last piece, the window replacements in the Kinsner HVAC. Do we have a timeline for when that would be put in place?
Yeah, so for the window replacement, that can kind of be done. These are typically summer projects when you say the windows as well. So what we'd be looking at, Steve, if you want to come up, I can't because I can't speak specifically to the windows. But the HVAC, you're looking at summer of 22 or summer of 23. Because those are big projects where we can't have people in the building. So that would be our next opportunity, I would think, for the Kinsner HVAC. But for windows, I don't know what the turnaround is for that.
Right now, I'm getting that assessed. I have a company coming through. I'm approaching it 2 ways, either replacing the glass itself, which is probably not going to be the most efficient way, but it'll give me a price point, and then replacing the windows themselves. Our windows are as old as some of our buildings, so with new innovations, with new style, I mean, if you built a house 50 years ago, build a house now, your windows are completely different, even just the style and how they efficiently they work. So I'm looking into not just replacing the glass itself, but replacing the entire window. So looking at where that price point is, and then just with everything opening up, the supply chain is still bogged down. It probably won't be until next summer, but if there's any way I could possibly get those funds allocated and get this done sooner, the sooner the better. But that would be my my guess right now would be probably next summer with the way steel and everything else is flowing.
Any other feedback or questions or suggestions from the board?
I just want to compliment everyone. It was certainly a lot of work, a lot of planning, and I think, I don't want to speak exactly for the board, but I think everyone's pleased that there's a balance between direct action that is going to help students, and some of the things that we're doing are a little more removed from students, but they should pay dividends over time. That's the coaches, some of the more administrative type positions for training, for raising all of our abilities, you know, like the reading coach, things like that. That's not just going to address loss due to the pandemic, but that'll pay dividends for years.
Yeah.
So I like that balance, but all in all, I think it's a great program, a great plan. And I'm also comfortable because although it's a 3-year program, the plan that we're specifically approving is year 1. And then we can review and adjust as necessary.
The only other thing I would share is there are a lot, I've shared this in the parent update, but just as a reminder, if anybody's, for whoever's watching this and when I send out, if you read this and you wonder, hey, something that I'm passionate about, something my student is passionate about is not listed there. Why is it not listed there? Why did the district choose A over B? There's typically 2 reasons. One of them is that expense may not qualify under the specific rules that we have to. You know, George and I talked a lot over these last few days. All right, Cameron, here's the different criteria. Where do we think, you know, this one fits? And we had ideas that are not on the list because we couldn't find anywhere that it would fit. And so the option of why it's not on here is probably because we couldn't find in that area for anything to fit under the allowable criteria. The other reason it may not be on here is because as a district, we've provided support to different areas or different programs. And as George has said, we cannot supplant. We cannot say, hey, we already have this, and now we're going to use, you know, we already have this teacher here, and now we're just going to use ESSER funds to pay for that same teacher. You can't do that. So if we've done our job as a district and have built programs and built supports, they're not listed there because we've got the infrastructure, we've got the systems in place, and we can't just add them to add them. So, and as I've said to a couple people that have reached out, if you have specific suggestions, let's talk specifics. You know, give us specific suggestions and we can give you specific feedback. Does it qualify and we just chose not to do it? Does it not qualify, or is there another avenue that we could take a look at that? So we welcome your feedback as we go throughout.
And just to add on to that, so under the areas where things qualify or not, it also, the overarching also has to be is how does it relate to COVID-19 to prevent, prepare, and respond to the pandemic. So that's the first overarching, and then there's the several items that it has to fall under a certain bucket for it to qualify as well.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying, we followed the guidelines. We wanted to make sure that everything we're doing is correct and legal, but I think to some degree it's kind of like getting deductions on your tax return. You know, you have to have something that you're willing to defend. You have to have some reasonableness to it. But like, you know, if I use the windows as an example, you know, at first pass, someone might scratch their head. How is this part of pandemic response? But at the same time, environment is part of our pandemic response, and therefore windows qualify. So we can use funds that we didn't expect to address a variety of needs. And so ultimately, I think that's a good thing for the district.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. And with that, that concludes the public hearing section.
And next on our agenda is Treasurer's Report. Mr. Diagnostic.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. I have 2 items for your consideration. The first item is a standalone vote, and it's a resolution for the renewal of an existing 6.0 mil tax levy for the purpose of current expenses. And before I read the resolution, just to give a little context, the November 2nd general election is the district's first attempt to have the 6.0 mil renewal levy on the ballot, which was last renewed in November of 2016. The levy will expire at the end of this tax year, December 31st, 2021. However, collections will continue through December 31st, 2022, as the collection year is a year behind the tax year. The November 2nd general election is the district's first attempt to pass this levy, and the November 8th, 2022 general election is the district's last attempt to pass the levy if it does not pass prior. The levy generates about $8.4 million of tax revenue at a 100% collection rate, and currently has an effective rate of 4.96 mils for residential property and 5.10 mils for commercial property. And again, it's a renewal levy, not new tax dollars. And to put the renewal levy on the ballot, it is a two-resolution process. The first resolution, the board directs the treasurer to request from the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Officer to certify the total current tax valuation of the school district and the dollar amount that the renewal levy would generate. And the resolution would require a majority of the board to approve, which is 3 yes votes. If the first resolution is approved, then there'll be a second resolution at a later meeting accepting the county certification from the county to authorize the treasurer to file the renewal levy with the County Board of Elections at the November 2nd general election. The second resolution would require a supermajority, which is 4 yes votes, and the filing deadline with the county is August 4th. So with that, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that a resolution declaring it necessary to renew all of an existing 6.0 mil current expense tax levy and requesting the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Officer to certify the total current tax valuation of the school district and the dollar amount of revenue that would be generated by that renewal levy to be approved. And the resolution can be found in Exhibit A.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? So I'll start the discussion. In my career on the school board, we've done a number of levies. And I had a rule that I follow when we go to the public for any kind of money request. And I have a three-legged stool, and I ask myself 3 questions. And the first question I ask is if the levy or the tax request is needed. This is a existing one. We still need the funds. In George's 5-year forecast, we always show that line where levies come off. And if this levy would come off, it would be difficult for us to maintain the level of education that we provide the citizens and the students if this would come off. And we expect to continue to earn the trust of the taxpayer, but it is needed. So I'm comfortable that that first question is answered positively. The second question I ask myself is it reasonable? You know, at the end of the day, you can see other districts and they'll go out to their community and it will be a very large ask. It'll be a very large millage request to the point where it's not reasonable to expect the taxpayer to shoulder that burden. This is an existing tax levy. We're already shouldering that burden, so I do think it passes my second test, which is it reasonable? And then the third test is my own personal question, because I ask this anytime I make a purchase or anytime someone asks me to fund something, and is that, can I look my neighbor, can I look the taxpayer, can I look parents in the eye and say, we're not going to waste your money? Nobody wants to buy something that's a waste. Nobody wants to invest in something that ends up being a waste of money. And I think we can all attest to that the money that the taxpayer entrusts to us, we spend and protect the same way it's our own money, if not more. So I can stand up with honesty and look any taxpayer in the eye and say, we don't waste your money. So for me, it passes that 3-part test that I ask myself every time we do a tax, whether it's a renewal or a new money levy. And so that's why I'm comfortable that we're bringing this to the taxpayer. And I'm going to ask the voter to continue to give us their support because we're going to earn it. We don't expect it. We don't just want it de facto. We're going to earn it with our good work and our hard work every single day. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Hearing none, Mr. Anagnostou, would you take to share?
I was just going to say, I agree.
Thank you very much. take the roll.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Salee,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries, and I'm sure George will bring us back the information on the valuation from the county, and then we'll be ready for the next step.
Yep, and plan on doing that on June 29th, board meeting. And then moving on to item B, which is the full-day kindergarten tuition for the upcoming school year. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the district sets tuition for the 2021-2022 full-day kindergarten at $2,200 per student. In the event the district is moved to remote learning, tuition will either be reduced or refunded. A refund will be issued at $12.36 per day. It is further recommended that the treasurer be charged with collecting tuition and preparing tuition contracts for parents to pay tuition in a lump sum or 2 annual payments. The treasurer may also grant parents a $50 reduction in tuition if paid in full prior to the beginning of the school year. Students qualifying for free lunch may receive a $200 reduction in tuition, and students qualifying for reduced lunch may receive a $100 reduction in tuition. And again, the tuition is based on the 50% of the annual cost of the personnel for the full-day kindergarten program, divided by the number of students that are currently registered. And any questions? No?
Thank you,
With
George.
that concludes my report.
Thank you, George. Dr. Ryba, Superintendent's report.
The first item is just a follow-up from our last couple discussions on elementary extracurriculars. So in your stack of papers, the next one there is the extracurricular opportunity study. So what has changed since last time? Based on the feedback, the board said, hey, we used to have these categories, take a look at seeing how we want to apply these categories of service, learning, arts, athletics, health and fitness, STEM, and building choice. And then the goals, as you see at the top, those are things that I took and gleaned from our conversation. We wanted opportunities for all grades, impact the greatest number of students, a variety of opportunities, and possibly look at semester options. So if we take a look at Chapman Elementary School, and this is kind of the example, we added a few things. I asked all of the elementary principals, just give us 5. They originally was 3. We talked about, do we want to have 3? Do we want to have 4? So I said, just take a look at 5. You don't have to check all the categories off, but the 5 categories are there. So you'll see they've listed the category. They've added 2 more opportunities. It was asked in the last column there, is this something that would be a new experience for students, or is this something that's been in place at the building in the past? And the first column is just the prioritization. So I've asked them to rank it 1 to 5. If the board says, hey, every building kind of is going to have 3 total supplementals, student council plus 2, you can see the 3 that they would prioritize. So with that, Mr. Miko, I know you said this time the board would give some clear direction so we can move forward with this, so I turn it back over to you in terms of starting to discuss and ultimately give guidance on next steps.
Does anybody have any specific questions on the data that we asked them to collect and bring back to us? It seems all pretty straightforward and reasonable.
What was the, if we had 3, did we talk about the difference in the cost from going from 3 to 5?
Yes. So, in these cost simulations, do you want me to include the student council one or not? Because student council is a current cost. So do you want me to share this in what is a new cost or what is the total cost?
New cost.
Okay. So if we do 3 at every building, the new cost is $28,000.
Which would mean a total of 4.
Right, 4 activities, that would be 4.
Okay, then I misunderstood. So a total of 3 activities,
Okay,
which would be student council and 2 new ones, that would be $28,000 of new expense to the district.
okay,
Okay? If we do a total of 4 activities, so that would be student council plus 3 more, that's a total new cost of $42,000 to the school district.
I have a question. I don't intend to throw a wrench into things, but Did we consider whether this would qualify for ESSER funds? Because I could make a good argument for why, particularly this year, having these opportunities available to students would be helpful.
There would be after-school programs that could qualify. After-school programs is an item that qualifies for ESSER funds, but we'd have to look at it. We didn't look at it specifically for this, but we can go back and look to see if it does or doesn't. But summer school, after-school programs are extended school day does qualify.
I think it's worth taking a look at that since we're sitting on this money anyway.
But would it maintain, it would just be for the 1 year or two, or it wouldn't maintain it, right? It would just be.
It wouldn't maintain it forever. I mean, ESSER 2 is for 2 years, ESSER 3 is for 3 years. So ESSER 2 ends after the 2023 school year, ESSER 3 ends after the 2024 school year. So
How many years would it cover then?
3 in total.
Okay.
And we could roll it eventually into our operating budget, but it would give us 3 years of time to, more of a trial error thing, like here's what we're gonna try, let's see what works, let's collect the data and kind of move, especially right now where kids, I went with usually 5th graders have the DARE opportunities and things that they missed out on this year. And so I went with my son yesterday to his end of the year dance, and I watched the kids attempt to socialize in a setting that was not as structured as a school day, and I realized very quickly how much they lost in their social skills in a year, and these opportunities do directly address a lot of those type of social settings. So I think we should look at it.
I agree. I mean, it gives us an opportunity to analyze how many kids would be interested in each, and then if we had to tweak it going forward, we would have that opportunity.
So Michelle, are you saying there'd be 5 to go with all 5 then for everybody?
Looking at this plan makes a whole lot more sense to me than the 3. It addressed the concerns that I had personally of not having all the areas covered in every building. There's a lot more K-5 now than there was before, so that was addressed. So this plan, I could maybe knock it back down to the 4, 1 in each category, but this plan looks good to me. And so I think we could look at it that way, or if we want to talk about 4, I'm open to that discussion as well.
Well, one of the things I'm concerned with is and it's more like the experiment and testing it and so on. I like to start small and then build. So whatever we're comfortable with, I would advocate for a smaller number, review it, come back next year. If it justifies it, we can grow it. But if you start big, it's hard to pull back. And
yeah, with the exception of like, let's say you only have an arts option at your school, you have no clue whether or not STEM would have been a big hit. And so that's where I think that maybe that approach might not suit us best here, because of the categories and how focused they are. Unless you start big, you're not going to have a sense of where the need or the interest is. And I'm not sure that, the principals know their students, but I don't know whether they know how much they would prefer one area or over the other, on a day-to-day voluntary activity.
so you're advocating for 5 total, 4 new.
I'm advocating for very minimum 3 new to cover those 4 main categories. And if we want to shift and push, kick the can of the building choice down the road, then so be it. But I think it's crucial that we cover all 4 categories, especially if we're going to consider how well they're attended. I think leaving a major category out, it doesn't really help us with that.
So you're advocating for the 42K? Or are you advocating for more than 42K in additional funding?
I wanted 3 additional opportunities per building minimum to cover arts, service learning. To cover arts, service learning, STEM, and athletics. So that would be 3 additional per building, since student council as service learning is already in place.
So that would be $42,000.
Okay. I'm definitely in favor of covering all 4 areas. One thing I would like the board to consider is the schools that are larger number of students, if it makes sense to add that 5th one. Just from opportunity to ratio, or opportunity to student ratio, I believe, the numbers of kids that are at Sarrar, Whitney, and Chapman are pretty significantly lower than Muraski and Kinsner. So with that, I would maybe ask that, I don't have the exact numbers, but making sure there's a significant or a equal ratio of opportunities for the students. So if it's something where we add a fifth one for Muraski and Kinsner, and then so that'd be 5 total of those schools and 4 at the others, purely based on the number of students that are at those schools.
Or we can increase the number of open opportunities, like open to, let's see our numbers, enrollment, right? Would that work? Like increase the enrollment numbers?
It could.
I mean, that would be an option, you think?
Yes, it'd be an option, but at the same time, does that cover, again, some of the other areas of interest for the number of students that are actually there?
So
Do you know the numbers
You want to
offhand?
go above 42?
If it makes sense, yeah. Do we know what the numbers are at the elementary
This for next year?
from enrollment?
So right now, Chapman will start smallest to largest. So Sarrar would be smallest at 350. Chapman, 366. Whitney, 448. Muraski, 513. And Kinsner, 621.
So, I mean, with Kinsner being almost double the size of Sarrar, that, to me, that makes sense to kind of look at the number of opportunities versus the number of students and families that are in that particular building.
Well, like, if we look at like.
Especially, especially if we can use ESSER funds.
Well, if we look like a choir, the enrollment is non-limits.
Correct.
So we wouldn't have to get another teacher for that one, right? So, because our cost is our instructor, right?
Correct.
For each of these. So, they're building, let's see, what's this, book club, we might need, would you say
I'm not asking for
another
another student,
instructor?
I'm asking for another activity.
Program,
another
yeah,
program.
yeah.
So I'm on the other end, Seth, because the idea to use ESSER funds makes sense. But the idea that whatever we choose to do today, we're going to say, well, ESSER funds are gone, we're not going to fund this anymore. I don't see that as being a reasonable step. I don't see us expanding.
I don't think anybody was saying that, Richard.
Oh,
I
but
think they're saying that we'd add it to the general budget as indicated by the number of participants in those particular programs over the course of those 3 years.
which is why I was comfortable with starting at 28K. And I was getting comfortable with 42K, but now we're discussing even more.
I believe that would be what, 48K roughly, if we added two additional.
If we just, so far, just so we all have the numbers correct. If we go to 3 total, inclusive of student council, that's 28. If we go to 4 total, that's the 42. If we go to Seth's plan of 4 total for everybody but Muraski and Kinsner get a 5th, that's 47.5.
Okay.
And then if we go to everybody gets 5, it's 56. If everybody gets 6, I'm just.
I think the other thing to be mindful of, if we use ESSER funds, there is a limit on them, which is at 6.1. So either something needs to come off, or we were putting that, a little bit of a set-aside amount, just in case if items come up in the future, that we would have that there. So it would either cut into that, or it would cut into something else that was already kind of set aside. So just Just wanted to put that out there.
It appears that the future came quicker than we anticipated.
Well, it's fine. I just wanted everyone to be mindful of,
Yeah,
just to be aware of
absolutely.
that, that's all.
I don't think 3 is enough, in my opinion.
Is this your entire wish list of ESSER that you told us? Because is there,
At this point in time, what I know in June of 2021, yes.
okay.
I think as, you know, some of the things that we've got to look at is we've got placeholders in for these ESSER funds, and we're hiring people. And that may cause, you know, we may be a little, the real person may cost us a little more than the placeholder. It may cost us a little less than the placeholder, right? So there's going to be some movement there, and we've got the funding built in, so we can accommodate that. But right now, as Richard said, yes, we are creating a 3-year plan, but really we're making a decision for what we're going to do for 21-22. So one of the things, you know, as you're making your decisions, to say, just taking on the concept of 4 and $42,000, a $42,000 decision in the grand scheme of $6.1 million in terms of what we have available is a decision that I believe, and George, I think you would agree that we could support that.
Right.
Coming back in May or June of 2022, we're going to then have to start, as the window closes, we're going to have to start look more strategically and say, you know, what do we want to do? The challenge with all of this is once you giveth, it becomes more difficult to take it away. So, you know, I would ask the board to consider that, you know, what is the point where we feel comfortable, whether it's, even though ESSER sounds great right now, and it is, you know, what do we want to support and financially support moving forward if ESSER's not there? Because if we're saying these are great opportunities for kids, then they're great opportunities for kids. And
Yeah,
the
I mean,
funding.
piggybacking off your comment, I look at the ESSER thing as if we can legitimately use the funds, that's fine
Yeah.
for 2 years. But I'm framing the conversation in the extracurricular is what do we want for now and going forward, and I don't think anyone disagrees with that. So I mean, I'm comfortable supporting the 42K. Do we have consensus on that?
I just want to ask for a point of clarification from Cameron. If we do with the 42K, there's a couple here, as I mentioned before, that have 2 arts. Can we make sure we cover all 4 categories?
Yeah, so
Okay.
if we're going to go with the 4, then I can give the direction that we need to cover the 4 categories.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, I am in agreement, Rich.
I like it better than the 3. I just think the ratios are off as far as offerings to the,
But I also think that's
Those
something we
communities.
can work through, and like I said, if we collect the data for 1 year, we can review it and see whether it justifies it after the year 1. But I also think there's an issue of growing from I don't want to say no extracurriculars, but very few extracurriculars, and now we're adding them all, and I just think it's reasonable to go slow.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to think of like with Seth's idea, like how since Maraski and Kinsner are a bigger school, there still are, like, I'm still looking at like choir. I mean, you don't necessarily have to add a new program to include more of students because of the lack of enrollment limits for, like, you know, I don't know if you're thinking about choir, but choir, athletics is no enroll. So you can have a bigger school, but still there's no limit. So still you have ability to, even though it's a bigger school, all those students can participate. Does that make sense?
it does if they're interested in that particular program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, of course, what's this? There's a limit to book club, and I guess it's, when you have a book club, it's harder to have more, students involved in the discussion, so that would make your point there, where if you have a bigger school, then only 24 students, you're gonna lose, you know, the percentage is gonna be, lower in participation, so that will make a difference there. So I guess I see his point in that case there, where they have more students, so only 24 students is a low percentage.
Does it make sense to say that Cameron has board consensus to budget 42K? And then let Kinsner and Muraski problem solve if there's ways to distribute things better? And I think we have a point person who wants to be the board liaison with Cameron and get in the weeds.
Sounds good.
I welcome that opportunity.
I think you have direction, Cameron.
Okay, thank you. And on behalf of our elementaries and our students, thank you for giving these opportunities. I think it's a well-needed, and I know will be appreciated by our kids, and we'll provide the feedback of enrollment and utilization, all that, so we can kind of continue to make strategic decisions. Moving on, we have the Ohio High School Athletic Association membership for the next school year. Be it resolved upon the recommendation that the superintendent that the membership in the OHSAA be authorized for the upcoming school year. Membership requires that Strongsville City Schools conduct their athletic program in accordance with the Constitution, bylaws, regulations, business rules, interpretations, and rulings of the OHSAA as found in Exhibit B. I'd also like to note that OHSAA passed a new rule that there will be now a fee assessed to all school districts. It's on a per sport basis, George. Do you recall?
Yeah, it's on a per sport. I just don't have the information in front of me.
Yeah, so I can't, it's like $50 a sport or something like that, but that's passed and there's no choice in it, but just so you know.
There is a choice, but
Yes,
I don't think
it's not a
it's one
choice
we
we
can
can
take.
exercise,
I think
yes.
in total it ends up to being, from what Denny shared, either 2,000 or 3,000, somewhere in that range, in that ballpark.
So just letting you know, there'll be a new fee for athletics that we haven't had in the past. And then finally, under my report, a revised calendar for 21-22 school year be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the revised calendar be adopted as presented in Exhibit C. Few highlights to note. I gave you a color copy just since the exhibit is in black and white. What this changes from our previous calendar, it bumps the start of the school year for our students back by a day. So a lot of our students, we're going to start on August 17th. Everything is going to be bumped back to August 18th. With the professional development, I want to commend again our instructional team at the district level. They've created a map of professional development for the entire school year. So every day you see on here for professional development is mapped through the entire school year. And we saw a need that we needed to have more professional development at the start. So we bumped a day there. And then the other change is we are looking to do 3 professional development days that would be asynchronous days for our students. We're still finalizing with our staff in terms of we want to be a more systematic and clear guidance on what those asynchronous days are going to be for our students across the district. But you'll see them on your calendar on October 18th, February 18th, and March 14th. We need that time to provide district-wide professional development in a variety of areas, and so that will be helpful for this next year. And the only other change that we made is we had early release days in the previously adopted calendar. All of those have been eliminated. So those are the 3 changes that have been made to the calendar. All of the other breaks, the end of the school year, the traditional non-school days are still the same.
I've just recently discovered that I don't like the color orange. So should I anticipate this being a permanent part of our professional development in terms of using the asynchronous days, or is this something where we're still recovering from COVID and we'll see that phase out in the future?
Yes, I'm not seeing this as a long-term, this is going to be a part of our calendar. This is, right now, we have a specific need because of the challenges we had with COVID and focusing on getting through COVID, the work that we have to do with all groups of teachers at the same time and our staff as well. These days are needed. So I don't foresee, when we start to look at the next 2 years' calendar, that these will be consistent, that we're always going to look at a handful of days. And I also think, as we This year is building the foundation in terms of standards, high-quality assessments, formative assessment development, teachers really understanding all aspects of the standards and the level of depth that's necessary. After we go on that, with the coach positions that we've been able to provide, we can then build upon that foundational learning and utilize our coaches to help support that throughout the school year. So I don't see this as a long-term plan. Yes, that's why I said it, Ms. Bissell.
As we get closer, will we be able to communicate better to parents what the expectation will be for asynchronous student days? I don't want to speak for all parents, I just want to speak for this parent, but every time I hear asynchronous student day, I start to twitch a little. So we'll want to do that and just make sure expectations are set correctly. I didn't know if Michelle wanted to ask the Polaris question, or should I ask the Polaris question? Is summer break in sync with Polaris? I mean, not summer break, spring break.
Yes. We haven't changed, so let me confirm, but I believe when we did this 2 years ago, I haven't changed spring break, and that's whatever it was then as well was aligned with Polaris.
As long as it is, I'll support it.
Thank you.
If we find out it's not, I'll withdraw my support.
All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Breckner for his discussion items. You have I'll put them on the board so we can see, but you have all of these items in order at your seat. So, Steve?
All right, so, let's see, get mine in the right order. The first item to discuss tonight, that's my agenda back there, is the bus drivers.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, oh, never mind, I have it. This is something that the transportation leadership and also the union leadership has been working together for. This has been an issue for a few years, and specifically not just obtaining substitute drivers or training substitute drivers, but once they're trained, having them stay and not go to other districts. So while this has been an issue, of course it's been exacerbated because of COVID-19. There's a shortage of drivers. It's been a trend for years, but there's definitely been highlighted due to the fact that a lot of bus drivers come to us in a second career, which lends itself to a certain age group. That age group under COVID was very susceptible, and you were putting them in direct contact with an age group that's a carrier. So you put those logical facts together, and we were having trouble getting drivers to come in, whether it be substitutes or hiring for open routes that we had. So again, those two groups, transportation leadership and union leadership, we all sat down and we started going through, and what you see as a result of some of that think tank. Basically, it models, if you've driven by any kind of trucking or transportation or transporting companies, right now they're paying to train drivers. They're even offering some signing bonuses. So that's, we're following the model that the business world is giving us. So as you can read through, this would be for anybody coming to us that's interested in being a bus driver that does not have their CDL or the Class B license with a school bus endorsement. We would pay for the training, pay for the literature that they would need to do, anything associated with the cost of being trained. At that point, once they've been trained, if they pass the test, then they would enter into some stipends. And you can see upon passing the 90 days of passing the test, new hire will receive a stipend of $150. Upon completing 1 calendar year of employment, $200, and then second year of employment, $200. We do have some provisions in there. If the new hire would resign or be let go to seek employment somewhere else, both parties agree that they would forfeit all signing stipends owed to them. However, number 6 does try and control that by saying that we would want them to enter into an agreement, just a letter of intent that they would be here for the 2 years, so that they would be on the books. And again, we're not facing the same issue of training and then having them go somewhere else. So all in all, with the cost of everything, we'd be looking at somewhere near $700 for new drivers after the 2 years of employment, between reimbursing and paying the cost ourselves for the training manuals and everything, and then the reimbursements. That's about the rough number you would come up to at that point.
Steve, what's the intent of how long this program will run?
Pardon me?
What's the intent on how long the program will run? Like 1 year, 2 years?
Just trying to retain people as long as possible is what it came down to. And then also we try to implement just a cap of, at some point, when you're running this type of program, if the incentives keep going too long, what's the incentives for people to stay with us that have been employed? So we're trying to walk that fine line of, we're incentivizing the new members, and we're not offending some of our veteran drivers either. So putting that cutoff in a 2-year timeline was what the feedback was from the union and the leadership that we should do.
Thank you.
So one of the, oh, I'm sorry, go on, Michelle.
How many people are we looking to hire in terms of full-time staff versus substitutes?
If we were able to get 5 full-time substitutes, that would
Okay.
alleviate. Right now, we've been dealing with 1 or 2. And they're driving every day. And we still, on a daily basis, without having the data in front of you of how many days out of the 180 or 189, we were having to split a lot of routes. So what that means is that, we would have a route that was open either through an absence or somebody retired or somebody left, nobody was filling that route. So what you do is literally take those 20 students, divide them 10 and 10, and put them onto other buses. In some cases that was an easy split, in some cases you have to split into 3 different buses. I know the transportation department was having to get very creative due to a lack of personnel to drive this year. Luckily, we have some technology helped alleviate some of those concerns because you could see exactly where your bus was in terms of, it was going to be a little bit late today, but you were assured of that, and it was communicated to you through that Here Comes the Bus app. So a lot of things are in place to alleviate the concerns of the parents and the community. It's just now trying to get enough bodies to run as efficiently as possible.
Transportation in general is difficult to find people to fill the jobs, whether it's trucking, whether it's bus driving, any of those logistics. You don't have to go deep in a newspaper to find how challenging it is for companies, for schools, for everybody. So, trying to incentivize new hires is a standard practice. I don't think anybody has to drive very far to see signing bonuses. We're hiring, things like that. Getting a little bit into the nitty-gritty of the suggestion, I want to make sure I understand it. The recipient would be paid a $150 stipend. Is it to reimburse the employee for these expenses, or is the reimbursement in addition?
The reimbursement's addition. That's how I get to the increased cost.
Okay.
Really, what the $150 covers and the timing of it is that's how much approximately the test costs. We don't want to pay somebody for the test before they've completed it.
Right.
So we don't want to be on the hook to keep paying for somebody to take the test and they fail 3, 4, 5 times. We'll pay for everything up to the test, but upon completion of the test, now we hope you're trained and you've trained with us, and when we have great trainers, so you pass it the first time, you pay for your test, we put the money right back into your account. But if it takes you 2 times, we're only going to pay you the $150 upon the completion of the test.
So do we currently pay for A through E?
We currently pay for the manuals, everything except for the test, and then of course we don't have any stipends on top of that. So the minute you come in and you say you want to be a bus driver with us, we start providing manuals, providing training, taking time out of our bus drivers. We have people called OBIs, on-board instructors. What we're adding to that is the incentive of we're going to pay for the test, where we don't do that now if you pass it, and then the stipends that happen once you've worked with us for a while.
but the other one, I mean, I just want to make sure the $700, the $700, you know, I added that up. A through E, what are the additional expenses that we're going to incur from A through E?
Nothing, currently we pay A through E. Sorry.
That's what I wanted to
I'm sorry.
verify. We
Yeah,
currently
I have
pay
it
A
differently
through,
on
we
my
currently
paper.
pay A through E anyways.
Yeah.
And if they don't, we pay A through E, and if they don't pass, we've still paid A through E, and we don't have a working driver.
Correct.
The only other suggestion I would have is, and I've seen it in other capacities, where the stipend is there, whatever we want to call it. I usually see it as a longevity bonus or something like that, but it's based on like a tuition reimbursement. We'll pay these things, but the expectation is you're going to work for whatever period of time, and if you don't complete that period of time, you know, whatever hasn't been paid, we won't pay you, and whatever we have been paid, you owe us back, and that usually ends up as a deduction from the final paycheck.
Okay.
But I think that's just something to consider. I mean, I think we want to protect ourselves, but at the same time, we need to attract these drivers, so I'm in supportive of whatever we need to do to make that happen.
And then, I appreciate that, and I agree. And then if you look at number 7, if somebody comes to us, and we hope this happens more, they're already credentialed, they have everything, then we would skip right to, sorry, I have it differently on mine.
Oh, okay.
It would skip right to anyone that comes with us with CDL or Class B and has driven the students within the last 2 years, which gives them that certification. They're automatically going to start at the step where, you know, the longevity bonuses, as you refer to it, which just makes sense. They've already been trained, they've already passed their test, so, you know, then we'll start with the longevity bonuses.
Steve, I have a question. We had this similar issue this year with the teachers, right, where we couldn't get enough substitutes, and rather than incentivizing, which I don't know if that would even work in that context, but we hired full-time substitutes. Have you considered that as an ulterior option of, hey, we're going to pay 3 full-time substitutes who are here every day and are going to fill the open routes, as opposed to trying to hire just substitutes?
Yeah, we've considered that. In fact, we are talking with union leadership about some things in the contract, and that is something that we've been looking at as well, in addition to this. Because that would fill some of our need, but we still would be working, even if we hired just some full-time subs, for lack of a better term right now, we would still have those unknown things that happen, and you still need your part-time substitutes to fill in just on various one-ofs that would happen. So really what we're looking at is a conjunction of all these things coming together, so we're not shorthanded.
So Steve, in terms of next steps, this would be would this be your work with the association? Would it be a memorandum of understanding that would come to the board?
Yes, that's my understanding is it would come as an understanding.
Yes. So if there's, you know, some of the feedback we've got, you know, Richard, of, you know, have that deduction piece of it as well. Any other feedback or things to consider? Because the next time you would see this would give Steve the green light to continue conversations with the association. It would be brought back to you as a memorandum of understanding. That gives us the authority to pay these stipends. So before Steve goes on and continues those conversations, anything else you want him to consider or talk about? All right.
All right, so we'll move on to the next discussion, which is the update on summer projects. You should have that list in front of you, and it's broken down by school. Just very quickly to go through, we do have a rock wall that's been donated, I believe, to the early learning preschool. So that rock wall will need to be installed. I know I told Cameron this, and sometimes I get a little bit too in the weeds, so if I start to lose you, I'll try and read the room. It's a little bit more complicated. The reason why it's on there as a project, it's a little bit more complicated than just affixing it to the wall, because the studs are metal studs. So you can't put that much load onto the wall. The studs are not made that way. It's going to pull the wall. So we're gonna have to build some kind of substructure to put that in. So it's gonna take more than just a day of putting some bolts into the wall and hanging it up and watching the kids go up and down. So, so that's why that's on there. We were able to buy this year some new cabinets for the main office. There's some rewiring that needs to be done with that. Moving on to Chapman, there's a Gaga pit there, but there's needs to have it relocated. And as you can see, the Gaga pits, there's a few of them on here. The reason why that's on there is we need to put a concrete pad down. If they're in mud, then that mud gets into the school, and then now, you know, the cleaning process is disrupted because of all the playground fun. So that's a concrete pad going in for the Gaga pit. Also, we are very lucky here, and it would not be a meeting where I'm talking to you for an extended time if I didn't tell you about the great people that work for us, especially in the areas of custodial world and also maintenance. We do our own concrete work here, and that's exceedingly rare, and it's exceedingly cost effective. So you're going to see on here a lot of sidewalk replacement, because now that we have the mini excavator that we've purchased, we have the forms, it's very easy for us just to pluck out some concrete that's broken and put new concrete in at a very minimal cost. So you'll see some sidewalk replacement at Chapman, at Kinsner, to name a few. Muraski, there's a storage area that we're going to be building inside the building. We were able to renovate one of the bathrooms and conserve some space. And of course, as soon as you conserve space, people find a way to put things in that space. So we're building a little storage closet there. Sarar, Gaga pit coming back into the picture. The sidewalk extension to the Gaga pit, because it doesn't make any sense to have a concrete pad in the middle of nowhere and a bunch of mud to get to it. So we're going to extend and put some sidewalk to it. Sidewalk replacement around the side. With all the programs that we're adding, sometimes you just run out of rooms to put them in, so you have to get creative and turn a big room into some smaller rooms. So there's going to be a wall that's going to be added to the media center there, and create a couple smaller rooms so we can accommodate some of the programs that are going in. And again, we're able to do that all internally at a very low cost. Let's see. The soffit repair, lighting replacement, if you would go over to Sarar and look up, there's some peeling paint. Some of the lights are out. So we're just going to be able to repair that, put some LEDs in. It will look much like what's here at the board office. So when that's all said and done. Whitney, another Gaga pit's going in. It's a very popular thing. I guess Foursquare is just outdated now. Chalk lines are out, Gaga pits are in. Sidewalk drainage project, which is in the back of the property. The sidewalk has been undermined so much with all the tree roots and everything that on a rainy day, snowy days, whenever the snow is melting, it turns into a lake back there. And we did have a lot of complaints from residents that something needs to be done. Keith and I went back there, and so what we're going to be doing is plucking out some of the sidewalk, building it back up, putting some drainage in, and trying to alleviate that. And that's going to be a project because we can't drive trucks or anything back there. So that's going to take some time, but it's sorely needed. And then there's sidewalk replacement both on the side of the building and then towards Whitney Road that needs to be done. SHS, I don't know if you knew this or not, but we have an acid neutralization tank for the chemistry labs. So that tank is filled with some porous rocks that absorbs the material, and every so often you need to go in and clean out those rocks because they cannot hold any more chemical. We went in and found that some of the lines are compromised, some of the leach lines. So we need to go in and repair those, and that'll take a few days. So that's why it made the list. The Strongsville Instrumental Boosters are purchasing a shed, and we're partnering with them to get that shed installed in the stadium. And then the last thing on there is some vacant property, the Allen sidewalk that goes to Shermer. We're going to have to talk about it in the facilities development. I've talked to the city. A new homeowner purchased the property adjacent to that sidewalk on Shermer and had it excavated. And at one point there was some kind of agreement, I imagine, because I can't find anything in writing, but that sidewalk is encroaching upon his property. the reality of it is, the sidewalk has to be, we have to investigate even what the purpose of the sidewalk is at this point. It literally is that sidewalk, you know, the sidewalk ends. You know, we have to look at that. I'll be talking that with my facilities development committee, but if it's decided through the conversations I've had with the city, they're looking into it as well, but if it's decided, what we'd be doing is plucking that out, taking down the fence that's there, and putting some backfill dirt in, and then seeding and putting grass there. I know that we do lease that to the city and they maintain, but from conversations I've had with my counterpart at the city, they're tired of losing a lot of weed whip lines on that fence as well, because it's just vines and everything else are entwined in that chain link fence. So it's becoming a nightmare to even maintain. So we're all looking at it from a practical standpoint of what is the purpose of it at this point versus the cost of keeping it. So those are the items on the list.
Any questions or follow-up for Steve? I'll just, I'm not going to lose a chance to bang the drum beat, but I think it's important for the public to know the way we conserve and stretch the taxpayers' dollars by being able to do so many of these things in-house. It would be either A, we wouldn't get as much done because we would be hiring outside contractors, or we would be paying a lot more to get a similar amount of work done. And then obviously pass on our thanks from the board to all of those people, because we all reap the benefits of their expertise and the ability to do these things in-house. And I know, you know, the drainage project, I know a number of these. I would just highlight that we need to make sure we're communicating with our neighbors, because a number of these projects are going to be big and noisy and loud, and we just want to make sure we communicate to neighbors when to expect them and things like that.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
No problem. My next discussion item is an issue to do with the tennis courts, and it's termed in the agenda as tennis court rental. I have up here tennis court options for the new tennis courts. So how do we get here, of course, is the biggest question. So what's the history here? So we have four original tennis courts that were seeing more wear and tear than just the normal. One of those courts is actually not even playable right now because of the size of the crack that's in it. So we did, of course, the most logical thing. We started to research of what would it be to resurface, what do we need to do to resurface, is this just something we can patch? And it came back that it was a cost prohibitive number versus using some of the remaining bond issue dollars for the project that eventually we decided upon. So once we looked at everything and evaluated, the decision was made to install those 6 new tennis courts. The purpose of them, of course, was to accommodate the district's tennis teams and physical education classes. And again, this project just used that bond issue money, the same bond issue that built the new middle school, renovated the high school, 2 turf fields, secure entryway project. This was also something we were able to do because of the way that we were able to conserve and stretch the dollar for the taxpayers. So that's when this went in. So that's how we got here. So the issue is, and the reason why we're discussing this tonight, is that the district's been asked by more than one group for permission to access the new courts because they're locked. We have 6 nice new courts, and people see those courts, and they would like to play on those courts. The reason why this is something I'm bringing to you is this is something we didn't have to deal with before. Our old tennis courts, which are still there, were always open to the public. Everybody was always able to, and still able to, go on those courts and play. And now, I do want to differentiate, this isn't groups that are wanting to rent, because that's covered with board policy at $50 an hour for the 6 courts. You know, and I know I've been asked to review those for a future board meeting, but this is not that. There's no issue with people that are wanting to rent. That's all covered in board policy. These are community members that are coming up and saying, we just want to be able to play on the courts. We want to know how we can obtain a key to get onto the courts, whether they're playing in other leagues and they just need a place to practice, or they're training for some kind of tournament. That's the circumstance right now. And we've never had to face this before because we've never had these nice courts that we felt like we needed to protect in some way. we just would always just, I don't have the data of how many people would get on our old courts because they're always open. So this is something new. Three of the four original tennis courts are still available. Through conversations I've had with the Strongsville City Schools tennis coach, Coach Black, there is interest in having the original courts renovated by the boosters and retain them as tennis courts. So that's in play as well. And also, I know from feedback I've received from these groups, they're very upset with the condition of some of the city courts, in particular the courts that are by the rec center. I know from conversations I had with my counterparts of the city that that's being looked at, and they're trying to address that issue to get those courts renovated too. So the question and the reason I'm bringing it up is, we do have some options of where we can go from here, but I wanted to frame the conversation where I don't know how extensive this problem is. If the boosters are going to renovate, and basically it would be not renovate to the point of our new courts, right, because we would have done that, but just even putting Band-Aids on the ones that are currently there. If the city is looking to renovate and make their courts better, what will the demand be for these new courts that we have? So just moving into what are some of our options, and the options that I've considered and I'm bringing to you. The first one is to leave the gates locked at all times and do not allow community use of the new courts. Only use them for the purpose of the tennis team and gym classes. And then the original tennis courts can be used outside of school hours and event at no charge to the public. Another option, the public will be permitted to use the new courts under our existing rental procedures and rates. Current rental charge is $50 an hour for the entire complex of 6 courts. The bigger hang-up that I've been seeing with some of the groups that have reached out to me is the insurance waiver. So they may not mind paying $50 and then they get a bunch of friends together and they have 6 courts to play on, but it's the fact that we require an insurance waiver because if someone gets hurt out there and we don't have that in place, we're leaving ourselves open from some liabilities. But if I was to play tennis, and if anybody's watching at home, I know I have more of a face for radio and all that, but I'm not a big tennis player. If I just want to go and I had friends that played tennis for whatever reason, for us to go and, okay, $50, okay, but how do I get an insurance waiver now? I just want to play some tennis. That's the big hang up. But that's the procedures that we have in place. So that, that needs to be considered as well. The third option, and researching with other districts, this is something that that they brought to my attention that they do, and with some variations in the option I'm presenting to you. The new courts are available to the community at designated times. That could be summer, after school, during school activities. It would take some coordination of making those school activities, i.e. tennis matches, of course, we would say no, please don't come here during the day. We have gym classes in and out of here all day, and of course, depending on the weather, but having it available for those times. However, there are some issues and some considerations that we would need to look at as a district to do that. The entry would have to be managed by using a key card system. And you'd say, well, okay, well, why a key card, not a key? Well, one thing I've learned in this job is that keys get duplicated and they walk away often, and codes talk. I didn't know they did that until I tell somebody, hey, the code's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and please don't tell anybody. And now all of a sudden everybody can open whatever gate is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, keys walk away and codes get talked, but a key card is something that we would be able to keep and also deactivate if we find that it's not being used either properly or, whatever structure we set up, the key card system would be the way that I would suggest that we do that. I've talked to our security company that we've been using, and it's not an issue. They've done these things before with a keyless entry. However, what needs to be considered with that is, as soon as you have something with a keyless entry, you need a power source. So we would need to investigate how to get power to that system. Also, we would, skipping into C, we would need to install cameras out there so that we can have surveillance on the courts in case something did happen. The combination of a key card and the cameras would help. And you can't always say it would ensure because that's some tricky language. It would definitely help us if there was an incident out there to say, okay, well, here's what happened, and here's the last key card that was used. So that way we can combine those pieces of information, because we would have a record of who has that key card and who would have it active. You know, we could have some kind of monthly rental fee to rent that key card. Just some things for consideration and further discussion before I stop talking here. Do we have it for community members only? Do you have to prove you're a resident of Strongsville if we open up this avenue? Or is it just so you have some kind of ID that we can contact you? You know, you'd still be able to use. So those two options. And then there are other school districts that they were telling me they give just one-time access. You know, it's not it's a deposit on a key card, and then it's expected back within 24 or 48 hours or whatever that the board has decided in that particular community. Versus do we do some kind of unlimited monthly? So you come to us, you get a key card, we have a flat rate of whatever that rate would be, and then for that month you have unlimited access, and as long as you keep paying that rate, then you would have that access. So just some things to consider, and I will now stop talking.
Who's ready to burn down the house about tennis courts?
Do you have any idea how many public courts there are in the city currently?
And just swinging out the gate with one, aren't you? Very uneducated count, I would say 10 to 15. Because I know a lot of the housing developments have at least one tennis court. It's the accessibility of those tennis courts that may be the issue.
Did you just mean public?
I meant public, not the neighborhood ones, because those are under
just public?
code and so
I
forth.
would say 7 or so. There's 4 over by the rec center.
Which are
and
in
there's
terrible shape.
some on Whitney. Let's just say 7. Okay. I have from my contact at the city, we have somewhere around 7.
Okay. And the old tennis courts, there's 4 there currently, but 3 are only playable.
Correct.
Do we know what the potential cost is that the boosters are looking at to maybe cover, and potential timeline of that?
I do not. That's still very cursory. I haven't got that information from Coach Black. Quite frankly, we were looking at, do we even keep them as tennis courts? Because that's that's property out there that could be used for some other things. But we thought it only fair to talk to the tennis team before we rip out some of the original tennis courts and say, do you still have use for them? And if so, what would you be willing to do to maintain them? And that's the feedback that I got from Coach Black. But I don't have specifics at this point in time.
Yeah, and so what Sean asked for when we talked this fall is he asked us to give him a year. He wanted to work with the USTA to see if there's some grants available. Obviously, he's talking to the boosters to see if there's some available interest there. And so this fall, we'll reach back with them and see, are you able to do something with these? Or if not, then, there's other purposes that we can possibly use that area for.
And I would think the other question to ask is utilization. I mean, if the USTA and the boosters want to make this a project, that's a great idea. But at the same time, to have tennis courts that aren't going to we don't have enough people to utilize them, I suppose you could have the concept of too much tennis court. And then I would want to know, is there a better use for those existing tennis courts themselves? But
Their purpose right now, Mr. Micko, is that would allow them to be a tournament host site, is to have those 9 to 10 tennis courts. So that's really the day-to-day use, probably not. But that's correct, isn't it, Steve? Yeah, that's really what they're looking for. So, but that's something you have to weigh, right? Is do we feel the value of being a tournament host site is worth, or versus what else it could be?
I was going to start, I think we have as a guide, we have our middle school track. And we have guidelines, we have some controls in place. We don't allow, we don't allow the general public to use it during school. We don't allow the general public to use it when an organization is using it or what have you. But correct me if I'm wrong, in the past, when it's not in use, we've said the public can use it to walk, for recreation, for exercise. And I know just driving by the middle school, you know, the youth in our neighborhood use it quite a lot for practice and things like that. So I would want to start by exploring it that way and see what the downsides are to that, and then try to get some better information from the city, because I think it seems common sense that what's driving this is there's the existing tennis courts aren't of sufficient good quality. So if those suddenly get improved, the demand from the public to use the high school tennis courts may drop, and we may have key cards for no reason. So that would be the kind of thing I would want to explore.
I just happen to be the chair of the rec committee.
That was a softball.
The plan had been to improve the courts, and COVID happened. We did have some funding. We weren't able to use that funding because COVID and whatnot. So we are back at getting funding, but it is on our list of things to improve. I just can't give you a timeline as to when that will happen. But we have a lot of community members who want tennis and pickleball, and I'm assuming pickleball is not something that you guys are interested in lining your courts for, so I do think that we will be doing that. So to the extent that that's helpful in making your decision.
Great. Then if and when the timeline is firmed up, we'll want to know.
We're having a committee meeting, the next meeting in June, or not this meeting, but the following one, so it's the 21st, and I'm hoping that we will have a better timeline at that point.
Thank you. Speaking of pickleball, I mean, that's something I think we can talk to Sean about, because I would think that might be something to consider if the boosters and USTA support that project. Maybe it does make sense to have pickleball or other activities on the courts. The only other request I have is now that we've said it out loud, at the next meeting, please bring the cost for the cameras, because regardless of what we do, I'm ready to approve cameras.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments, things to consider?
I'm just,
I'm confused where we're at. I'm sorry. Are we saying nothing at this point on a decision, or yes, open to the public?
I was going
And
to
you want
suggest we
cameras?
wait.
I'm just-
I wanted to, wait and see what the city is going to do, and then I think that'll determine our, how quickly we need to move on it, unless people want to move on it sooner.
Okay.
that's what I was going to ask Steve. Is there a timeline for when you want some direct decision from us, or is this kind of just the first pass at this and we'll take our time, or?
It's just honestly, what I'm hoping to get tonight is just the conversation started.
Okay.
So that I can go back to these groups and say, look, I don't have a decision yet, and I know that won't pacify, but at least we're bringing this up and we're considering, and then, then we can move the discussion to some action points, combined with whatever other information you needed from me to help make a decision. So that's honestly what I was wanting tonight, just to bring it up and get some direction of what you need from me to make an informed decision next.
Could you also bring, I know obviously they're brand new and only have essentially one season of play on them, the life of the court as it is before having to be resurfaced again?
Mm-hmm.
And if there's an increase of 25%, how much that shortens that life?
Okay.
Thanks. Or whatever percentage
Yeah.
you think it may be.
I'll be conservative with it.
So
I had a question about the insurance waivers. You said there's an issue with that. What is the issue with the
People don't want
insurance?
to sign them.
People don't want to go get one
Oh.
because I shouldn't say it that way. That may be too harsh. They're nervous about getting them because they've never had it before. And saying to somebody, well, yeah, you can come play tennis, but we need your $1 million waiver. I mean, no matter how great of an athlete they think they are, they don't think it's worth $1 million. And it doesn't cost $1 million, obviously, but it's just something that people aren't used to.
Mm-hmm.
And they see it as a really big roadblock, and it is more paperwork that they need to do for something they feel like they should be able just to come with a racket and a couple sleeves of balls and have a good time, and that's that.
Now, why doesn't the city do that, like a waiver? And we would?
Yeah, that's been our policy for anything that we rent,
Okay.
so. We
So-
assume that liability.
Yeah, so one of the things to, so as we go through this process, what do you have? You have a group of individuals in the community that have had some frustration that they don't have access to the new courts. And they've been great at working with us and understanding why we're here and the history and all of that. But our answer, until we decide differently, Steve has to work underneath board policy. And board policy says if you want access to our facilities, you have to pay this hourly rental rate and you need an insurance waiver. So, you know, Steve is implementing the policy that the board has developed. And kind of going to Richard's analogy or connection to the middle school field. The middle school field is open for all the reasons Richard said, but Pat Catan Stadium is not. You know, if you want to use that same logic, you could say the original tennis courts are open to the community, but the brand new ones are not. And so until that point, we will continue to say you can rent them at the rate and you need to have this. But if you don't want to rent them, you could have these original tennis courts. And we've decided as a board, these are open to the community. So that's just, as Steve said, starting the conversation, starting thinking, looking at options, talking to some people that have shared some other feedback, and that we can move forward with getting the information you want, as well as sticking with our current practice until further notice.
Just a point of clarification, the old courts are or are not open to use, the 3 courts that are good?
They are.
Okay, so people have courts to go and utilize.
But
They're just
it's
not
the
new.
same problem that tennis enthusiasts have with the city tennis courts. They're not.
Correct. I was just trying to clarify,
Yep.
are other courts actually available on our?
Yeah, there are.
Thank you.
So what I was going to suggest, unless there's more conversation, is, you know, I think we do, first pass, now that Mrs. Kosick said the project probably won't happen this summer, is to see whether we can do that or not. So if there's some holes in there, if we put in cameras and we're reasonable, I don't think anybody would be open to having, you know, someone having a tournament and charging fees, et cetera, and using our tennis courts for free. I don't think anybody would want that, and we'd want the rental or what have you. But I think what I want to do is throw up and see where the problem is. If we had a safe and simple way to allow community members to play tennis during the summer, what's the downside to that? So if we all just can think about that, and if Steve, you can think about it rigorously, and put it in an update so we can further this conversation at our June meeting, and hopefully give our tennis group enthusiasts something more to go on than we're thinking about it.
So just so I'm clear, it meets your expectations, where my mind is, and tell me if I'm on the right track, you would like me to put some numbers to this. You know, how much are the cameras? How much would it be to have the infrastructure put in, a power source for a key card entry system? So that's that side of it. Then you want me to do some kind of cost analysis of the depreciation of the value of the courts, depending if we ramp up use by 25, 50%, somewhere in the neighborhood. Am I on the right track then?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we want to make an informed decision. I think everybody recognizes these are community-funded assets. We need to protect them for their intended purpose, which is our students. But at the same time, if we can extend the usage of them reasonably, we would want to approach that. That seem?
Makes
Okay.
sense.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm not done yet. I don't know, that sounded a little bit final, like I'm tired of talking to you, but we're still going on my section here. So the district servers, be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the operations manager be authorized to purchase 3 new servers for the district from Acuity VCT, the amount of $46,380. Additionally, to include yearly maintenance and upgrade cost of $4,420 for a total of $50,800, and funding to be from the general fund, and this is Exhibit D.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? I'll just share for the public's edification. I did speak with Steve. I spoke with Jim Hamelick, who's our network manager, and Jim and I got to geek out on all the details. But the proposed servers are needed in the district. The price is reasonable. It's a local company, so we get great service from them. So everything's in good order for this, and I'm supportive of it. Any other discussion? Mr. Anagnostou.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes, and the motion carries.
The next item is a copier printer lease agreement from the Permanent Improvement Fund. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education approves the awarded 5-year lease agreement for copiers and printers with Meritech with monthly payments of $998.54, not to exceed the amount of $59,912.40 over 5 years. Funding to be from the Permanent Improvement Fund, and this is Exhibit E.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? I also had a discussion with Mr. Breckner, and we talked about the excitement and nitty-gritty of copiers, but this is a wise use of our money. Our existing copiers are beyond where it's wise to continue to repair them. We're spending more money to repair them than we would to have an efficient lease. So this is a good use of our taxpayer dollars. Any other discussion? George, take the roll.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes, and the motion carries.
Thank you, Steve. Next up, we have Assistant Superintendent Jenny Pelko with the Human Resource Report. Jenny?
Thank you, Dr. Ryba. Under Human Resources this evening, I have the following items for your consideration. Under C1, resignations for certificated staff, resignation of a non-certificated athletic supplemental. Under C2, we have appointments for certificated staff. Mr. McGill, I do need to make one change from the floor. Celia Joyce, who's listed as a social worker, that will now become our employee. This will be, instead of it saying this is a new ESSER funded position, it will be this is a new wellness funded position. We had to make that change. Continuing under C2, we have the appointments of all of our summer school or summer learning opportunity staff here. And continuing, we have more appointments under C2 there for certificated. We have substitutes. We needed to create a substitute pool for our positions as well, just to make sure that these classes are covered each day. We also have some non-certificated staff that is helping us out, and also nursing services there. We continuing appointments for certificated supplemental contracts paid upon completion. Under C3, change in full-time equivalents for non-certificated athletic supplemental contracts. And that concludes my report.
And that concludes my report.
Any questions for Jenny or Cameron? I will just say it might be counterintuitive, but I think it's great that we actually need substitutes for summer school, which means that many students are attending and that many teachers are going to be teaching. So we need to plan on having substitutes. So again, I think that's a good thing. Consent calendar, action by the Board of Education and the adoption of the consent calendar at this point of the agenda means all items appearing with asterisks are adopted by one single motion unless requested otherwise. Do I have any otherwise? Hearing none, we do have the correction for Human Resources, number 2, appointments. Celia Joyce will be paid for out of a wellness-funded position. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Hearing none, take the roll, George.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes, and the motion carries. Board of Education other. Do we have any Board of Education or other? We'll jump ahead and give a mini legislative update. The state Senate did pass their version of the Ohio budget bill and have provided a different way to, or a different plan to fund education, different than the Fair Funding Act that was in the House. So everybody interested and uninterested needs to continue to pay attention and advocate for Strongsville's interests. But as usual, budget time in June gets interesting. But I will, and I know Sherry will have more updates for our next meeting.
And the good news is, we didn't lose any dollars under this.
In the simulations, so don't trust the simulations. I have nothing else. Anybody else? Hearing none, we do have reason for executive session under the topics of
To consider the employment and compensation of a public employee.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? George?
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Hausum?
Yes.
Ms. Bissell?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes, and we will go into executive session at 9:15. We have no expectation of further business. Thank you for everyone's attention. Have a great summer and a great summer school. Thank you.